Welcome back for part two of the True North information meeting.
Okay, so we're just going to go over a few of the different types of education, including public schools, private schools, and homeschooling.
Some alternatives to public school are private schools and homeschooling, and we're going to get into the pros and cons for each of those because every single model of school has pros and cons, including True North.
Okay, so public school. Public school has a lot of pros, actually, and there are some teachers that are just phenomenal. So you can get Christian teachers in the public school education system, but maybe they're not allowed to say that they're Christian, but there are Christian teachers, so they're a light there. Some of the pros are social networking, sports, clubs, ease of college recognition, easy modifications for health and behavior issues. There are some wonderful programs available, and there's a lot of money in public schools. So that typically the schools are nice, or at least around here. The buildings are nice. They have a lot of gyms and football fields, etc.
They have the ability to offer more.
Yes. And cons, some of them are a 40+ hour work week for children. When you go to school on campus for 35 hours and then bring homework home, we feel like it breeds growing up and bringing your work home and can throw the balance off that God intended for us to have in our family structures.
There's also a lack of freedom to travel, and that stems down to attendance days. There's funding that is hand in hand with the attendance that's met, so missing days for family travel is not really an option.
And it's actually a pretty critical issue in the public schools. I've personally known people who have been brought to court because their kids missed too many days of school and they actually didn't have doctor's notes. In this particular case, one of the students had been sick several times, but not sick to the point that they needed to deal with a doctor, and the family couldn't afford it because they didn't have insurance, and ended up in court with a kindergartner. So to me, that seems silly, but there's reasons behind it. Funding is tied to attendance in public schools.
There's also a lack of individual attention to a student. Classes are taught on a snapshot for the entire classroom and a skill set that needs to be met by each quarter and by the end of the year. And whether a particular student is struggling in any issue is not regarded when you're looking at the classroom whole. They need to meet a standard.
And children typically spend more time with their public school teachers than they do with their parents in awake moments.
The biggest issue that I have with public school is the lack of control in what's being taught by the teachers. And really, not even the lack of control, yes, but the lack of knowledge in what's being taught to your students, because they're, especially right now, most of the homework has been dialed back more than in years past, but the majority of instruction is in class, and parents have no access to what is being taught, let alone what agenda it may line up with.
Okay, we do have a couple of examples that are pretty important here. In my own experience, my daughter Alex, who is now like 28, so this is back a few years, but in junior high, she was given an assignment at Branch Crossing on witchcraft. It was during the Halloween time frame, and it was a major grade project. The history book told about a paragraph about the witch trials in Boston, but the teacher decided to go further and do a major grade project on the study of witchcraft. I didn't want my child to study witchcraft, so I actually went to the teacher and said, hey, can she do a paper on something different or a project on something different? And the teacher said no, that she had been teaching that over 20 years and never had a parent complain about it. So I went to the principal and said, hey, can you just please have her allow us to do a different project? I don't want my child to do a major grade project on witchcraft. And he stood by the teacher and said she will either get a failing grade or she'll do the project. And so I had to go up the line, and I didn't like that too much, but pretty much it came down to she was able to pick a different subject, so that's wonderful. But just the fact that that came up and was kind of butted against, instead of just saying, hey, go ahead and do it on this, or this, alternative was just made an impact on me, and I just wanted, that's something that I didn't agree with.
Some other examples, one is on a national scale and one is on a more local scale. On a national scale, there are 6 states that have in the last 5 years been studying Islam and the religion there, and it's not just a overview study. I've heard of many schools using an overview study of all the religions, just what is their basis and whatnot, but this was more of a 3 to 4 week spotlighted study of Islam specifically, where they went to a local mosque, as a field trip, where they memorized sections of the Quran, where they donned a burqa, and where they actually memorized sections of the Quran and staged a jihad. So those are absolute line crossing issues for me. Luckily, we live in the state of Texas, and in 7th grade history, we studied Texas history, so that wasn't a huge issue here. However, here we have had several literature books that study things that include child rape and other really not child-friendly topics.
Right.
So there's absolutely a lack of control in what's being exposed to your children in an academic setting.
So I guess the message here is there are definitely pros for public school, a lot of them, but there's also a lot of cons. And just try to pay attention to what your kids are learning or studying. That's the most important part if you choose to do a public school route.
An alternative would be a private school model. Here you can get a Christian education. The parent does have more involvement and definitely knowledge of what's being taught. There is good curriculum that's generally Bible-based if you're attending a Christian private school. Again, you do have qualified teachers, the same that you do in a public school setting, and generally you have more sports available in private schools. There are 5-day models, or there are some 3-day models as well, but they do have a higher tuition and they have more sports available for that. And again, social circles, they have a lot of ability.
So it can be financially straining, and sometimes if it's a full 5-day school, that you can have the same type of 40-hour work week for kids, potentially breeding them, teaching them to bring home their work as adults. Also, the lack of freedom to travel. Those are some of the cons, but there's definitely pros and a few cons as well.
And then there's homeschool alternative, which can be fantastic and can be burdensome. It really depends on this particular family and how they enact homeschooling in their house. Some pros would be more time with family. That's definitely a plus.
And low financial costs. You have the cost of curriculum and enrichments if you choose to do them. But the ability to work at your own pace, and that's a big one, because if you are advanced, you can just speed right through subjects, and if you have a little bit of trouble understanding it completely, you can stay and actually teach fully until they understand it fully. So it's a great education. Instill family values. You get protected from outside agendas that you don't approve of. The ability to travel with your family without being having trouble for it. You don't have to make up sick work. Some of the cons are potentially less time establishing friendships, and you can. Many people do this successfully, where they actually establish a routine for their kids to meet up with friends or do sports or outside enrichment activities. So.
There is, however, a lesser availability for sports. In homeschooling, there are some homeschool teams that have growing.
It's starting to get better. It's starting to get better. There's TCAL and there's some other things available now that there weren't in past years. But still, homeschool sports are a little less available than public school or private school.
There is an associated fee with those groups. And the more children you have, the more difficult it is for them to join each of their desired sports.
And enrichment as a whole, art classes and music classes, everything costs when you're homeschooling. So that can add up really quickly. I know when I was homeschooling and trying to get my kids involved in art, it was like $200. Karate was $200. sports were even more, and music was more.
Mm-hmm.
So if you add that all up, they really can only do one thing, or and then if you have multiple children, it becomes even more difficult, and that doesn't include the driving, the extra driving. So that's a big con, but there are so many pros for homeschooling. One of the cons is parent time.
Me time. And that might be especially noticeable for all of the parents across the nation right now that are at home with COVID restrictions, that they're doing their school online, but it's at home. And sometimes, especially I've noticed for my little ones, me as a teacher, even though we've continued very seamlessly at True North with online schooling, it's still been really difficult to have them home every single day, all week long, where we're trying to school, but I have to help them on Tuesdays, where I had been able to send them to school and do my own teaching in 2 separate areas. They were in a classroom with their teacher getting instruction, and I was in a classroom giving instruction, and now I'm trying to do the same thing at both times, and it's very difficult.
So little me time is basically what
little me time, a breather, just a okay, and now I can be fun mommy again, and everything is great. That could be an issue for homeschooling parents.
And it's difficult to choose and manage curriculum. The first year that I homeschooled, I think I purchased way too much curriculum, and it's very difficult as a homeschooling parent to understand how much curriculum to actually purchase and how to set aside assignments and homework and such, and how much is needed and what is too much and what is too little.
Also, the parent would have to be the one to develop all of the lesson plans, and what are we going to do every single day, and how are we going to lay that out in a timeline, and how am I going to grade all of this, and how am I going to establish that teacher-parent or teacher-student relationship with my child, and all of the management part that a teacher would take on.
And kind of wearing the hats of mom, wife, parent, teacher, grader, discipliner. There's a lot of hats to wear. However, there are people that do this very well, and I am a homeschool advocate. I do think that it's a fantastic way to educate your children. I just know, for me, it's easier to have someone else in charge of the teaching, and so I can be a little bit more, back up a little bit more, and be the fun mom sometimes. So anyways, pros and cons for homeschooling, and we'll move on to the pros and cons of True North. And I just want to tell you straight off the bat that I will always tell you the good and bad of True North. There's always going to be good and bad in any school, because you just can't get around it. So I'll always be honest. And I also want you to know, if after listening to this information meeting, you decide this is not for your family, I am okay with that. I'm not offended at all. We aren't offended because we know that it's not for everybody. It's not meant for everybody. Some kids are meant to be the light in public schools. Some kids are meant to be in private schools. Not all schools are meant to, not all Christian schools are meant to be only like-minded. I mean, there are different paths, and God sets us that up on purpose. So please don't duck at the grocery store. It's perfectly fine. If you choose True North, that's wonderful. If you don't choose True North, that's okay as well. So let's move on to the pros and cons of True North.
Some pros of True North: we specifically pray in every single teacher, every single staff member, and every single family. So you can rest assured knowing that our teachers are Christ followers and Bible believing teachers, and our staff members are as well.
Yes, and another pro is the balance between work and family. We are pro-family and pro-time with family. So we try to keep a good balance between actually doing home day work and spending time with your family.
Parental involvement is integral to the system. You have to be involved, and you will know what your child is learning in the classroom as well as what they're doing at home, because you're a part of the system.
Also, we try very hard, and I think we're pretty successful in the competitive tuition rates we compare to most preschools in the area.
True. Yes, we also have small class sizes. I believe our class ratio is 18-1.
And
we offer enrichment courses
as part of our regular regular schedule.
Hold on 1 second, y'all. I'm sorry. This is probably part of the reason that we are pausing this into part. Sorry about that.
Thank you so much for your patience. We have little ones. Okay, so we also offer enrichment courses, and our Thursday is set up for that specific thing. Some of our enrichment courses are art, music, sports, karate, coding. We try to get a big variety, but these are all included in our school day as well as our school tuition.
We also have partnered with Lone Star, so dual credit classes are available and they're right on True North campus.
And something to think about with that, it's so wonderful because even when we partner with classes with other instructors, we're able to give a Christian worldview. So as far as our kids in high school being able to knock out some of their college credit at a very, very, very discounted rate, they're also getting a Christian worldview with that. And it's actually fantastic. So my 10th grader actually has 18 college credits already, and she's not the only one. So just wanted to make sure that you're aware of that. And then also another pro is the ability to have school with friends. There's something just an innate want for students to be able to be in an organized setting and an organized schedule where they're meeting with other siblings or other kids the same age group.
And in the same token, you can rest assured as a parent that when we pray in each of our teachers and staff, and we're praying in families also, that the families around you are like-minded. So your students can have friends that are from like-minded families.
Which is so awesome. And they learn that just because they're Christians doesn't mean it's not fun. We have great, funny children in our school. So that's a big plus.
Some cons.
Although True North is partnering with the YMCA and TCAL is Texas Christian Athletic League, we don't have home fields for sports, and we don't have as many sports available. Right now, our plan for 2020-21 school year is to have volleyball and basketball in the fall, volleyball for girls, basketball for boys, and in the spring, soccer for boys and softball for girls. We would love to add more sports in the future, but this is where I think we're headed for this particular time.
We also do not offer kindergarten, so that is a con to some people. All right, we're going to stop right there, and we're going to move right on to part 3. So head on down to the link below and go to part 3. We'll see you there.